everybody. Happy Monday and welcome to another weekly energy forecast where we're going to talk about the energetic weather and the astrological weather and how they all layer on top of each other and create our experience for the week. So in this session, we're going to explore the moon cycles, the energy of the season, and also the astrological energy that we have coming up this week, and explore my interpretation of how things might manifest in your life. If you do want to understand a little bit more about how this will affect you more personally as well, you can check out your birth chart. Your natal chart actually will be on our website next week, not quite there yet, but you can also go to any website like Cafe Astrology and have a little look at where some of these transits are falling in your chart, and they'll be able to help you to understand how you can how these transits might be affecting you more personally, particularly the astrological transits. Okay, so let's get into it. So this week we have quite an interesting layering of energy, which is really reaffirming this theme of introspection, of moving inward, of being more reflective and less forward moving momentum. So we have a last quarter moon phase, which we had a couple of days ago, and now the moon is going to be descending this week to its new moon at the end of the week on Sunday. So when we have a last quarter moon, that's generally a time to be active and shedding, letting go, reflecting, refining, evaluating, understanding what this cycle has brought so we can make space for the new, and also understand what we're taking with us into the next cycle. So this is a great week for getting clarity before you set your intentions of looking at things. We also have a Mercury retrograde beginning on Tuesday, which is tomorrow, and that is also very introspective energy as well. So we have 3 Mercury retrogrades a year. Mercury usually moves forward in the sky, and then 3 times a year it appears as it's moving backwards, and this is almost like a review period. Again, it just kind of gives us we have the autumn time, which is very reflective. We have the cycle of the moon, which is very reflective, and we also have planetary cycles which help us to go in and reflect as well, and we're really getting a layering of that this week. We also have a new moon, as I mentioned earlier, coming up at the end of the week. So even though this is kind of bringing a sense of a new beginning, a time to set new intentions, with this happening in the autumn, with this descending moon, with the Mercury retrograde, and with Mars about to station retrograde next week as well, on the 6th of December, I think that's coming up on, then there really is this sense of, yes, there might be fresh new energy, but it's probably better directed in a more, how can I set intentions to tie up loose ends? Like, we're moving into the last trimester of the autumn season here. So the autumn season is a brilliant time to review, to shed, to let go, to empty out, ready for the new to begin with the winter solstice. And that's when we start to dream in the new, right? Because we've created the space and we've let go of the baggage that's weighing us down. So the last trimester of the autumn season, we've kind of gone through this process, consciously or unconsciously, of shedding, of letting go, of releasing. And as we get to the end of the autumn, it's a really good time to tie up loose ends, to almost kind of like that final, like, yes, I've dealt with this. Yes, the story has come up. We've had the intensity of Scorpio season, which helps you to go deep. And then this last trimester really is about finishing things for good, really closing the door firmly. So that doesn't necessarily mean about digging deep and kind of starting to uncover something new. Although if you're feeling called to do that, then, please do. Always check in with your intuition first. However, this is a really great time to start tying up loose ends. So even with this new moon, yes, it's a time to set intentions, and we're going to unpack this a bit more. However, it could be a lot more beneficial to kind of set some more introspective, reflective intentions, or intentions around like reviewing things, finalizing things, ending things, finishing things. So let's get into the actual breakdown of the astrological energy for this week. So on Tuesday, the 26th of November, as I mentioned earlier, Mercury is going to station retrograde in Sagittarius. So this is a time for introspection. It's where energy turns inward. So with Mercury retrogrades, with all planetary retrogrades, we have a pre-retrograde shadow. So that's where Mercury is moving forwards as it does normally, and it travels before it goes retrograde and moves backwards. It travels over the degree points that it's going to later retrograde and move back over, right? So generally that's been the last, say, like 2-3 3 weeks-ish of time, Mercury has been traveling over those pre-retrograde degree points. Now Mercury on Tuesday is going to station retrograde and go back, and then it will station direct around 3 weeks later and then begin to move forward again. So we have the pre-retrograde, which is before, we have the retrograde, and then we have the post-retrograde shadow where it moves back over those degree points for the final time. So this can often bring up things. So the last 3 weeks, for example, might have brought up things that you were thinking you were moving forward with. And now with this retrograde, you might be called to revisit. Mercury is all about reviewing. Mercury retrograde is all about reviewing, revisiting, evaluating. Or it could sometimes as well, and this is why Mercury retrogrades, I think, get a little bit of a bad rep, because a lot of people will say, oh, they make things go wrong, right? And they don't really. They bring things up for review because something needs a bit more attention before we move forward. These periods of review are as valuable as moving forward. We just tend to value in our societies more the action piece than we do the reflective piece. But they have equal value, and they're all important in the cycle of everything. So there might be a little bit of a push-pull here, especially with this being in Sagittarius, of what you wanting to expand and move forward. But especially, we're also having an opposition to this Mercury retrograde of Jupiter. So Jupiter wants to expand and move forward. Mercury retrograde wants to go inward. And because they're in an opposition to each other, there's a bit of tension there. So there might be this hunger inside of like wanting to move forward, of feeling optimistic, of feeling ready to go, of wanting to kind of just go for it, dive in, not think about the consequences. Like Jupiter just is very optimistic. It sees the best in things. Whereas Saturn, which is going to be in the conversation later, is realistic. It's boundaries. It's like having realistic expectations of like, okay, what are the steps and how are we actually going to get there? So there might be a little bit of that this week. What I would really, really encourage you to do is just take things slowly. Triple check everything, move slowly, don't rush stuff, avoid making finalized commitments. Like signing contracts in Mercury retrograde is often really advised against, just because there can be miscommunication. Mercury is the planet of communication, and also short distance travels as well. So, you know, we do often in Mercury retrograde see a lot of like technology kind of freaking out on us, you know, issues with transportation, or just kind of, you know, mistakes coming up quite a lot. And really it's because we're being called to go inwards. We're not really being called to push forward. And when we're pushing against energy, then that's when it kind of creates discomfort. So where you can, try not to move forward, try to use this energy as much as you can to review, refine, and triple check absolutely everything you can. You might experience kind of wanting to move forward in a certain area and not being able to. Again, if you are experiencing that, don't worry. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with the situation. There needs to be a period of review before you can move forward. The forward moving energy will come probably more early 2025. We are also pre-Mars retrograde here as well, which is going to be happening, as I mentioned, next week. So there's a lot of energy that's going to be turning inward. It's not just Mercury at this time. And it's also going to be happening in fire signs. What I would really encourage you to do is check out where you have this Mercury retrograde happening in your chart. So if you look at your birth chart and find the area of life that Sagittarius is ruling, so for me it's the 12th house, for some people it might be the 3rd house, that will give you an indication of where things might seemingly be stalling in your life, and it will give you a bit more insight in how this might be affecting you more personally. So as I mentioned before, this this Mercury retrograde is going to be opposing Jupiter and also squaring Saturn a little bit later on in the cycle, but they're not exact at the moment when Mercury stations, but they're not too far off. So there's this real sense of like, when we have a T-square, Mercury is wanting to go inward and reflect, Jupiter wants to expand and explore, and then Saturn wants to get really real. So there is a little bit of tension here between like planets pulling in opposite directions. So because there's so much retrograde energy coming, because Jupiter can make you kind of maybe be sometimes a little bit too optimistic as the out of balance manifestation of Jupiter, or maybe going too far. Again, I'd really recommend just kind of holding back if you can. And I also really want to encourage you, like, you know, always check in with your internal compass, because you know you better than anyone else and you know what is best for you. But I guess what I'm encouraging you to do is just be really, really present to your choices and really honest with yourself about why you feel like you're making those choices. Is it because you're in a rush? You know, what is the motivation behind that? Sometimes we do need to, you know, push forward and take action, and then there might be a period of review after, but maybe that's what's meant to happen. Maybe that's what's needed in order for you to get to where you need to be. So always move with your intuition. However, I would advise trying to kind of rein things in a little bit, especially over these next couple of weeks. There might be this sense of like, oh my God, everything's amazing, this is the thing. And then suddenly Saturn's going to come and give you that reality check. But often when we move towards the Jupiter and Mercury opposition is kind of coming first. And then after that, we're going to get that square from Saturn. So there is this sense of, we might almost get like a false start, and then Saturn's going to come in and be like, no. Let's check this out. Let's make a plan. Let's stop rushing. And maybe Saturn might bring some consequences in for that as well. So I would definitely say Saturn might also bring clarity though, and that will come next week more so. So Saturn sometimes, because it brings structure, because it brings order, it might also give you that light bulb moment that you needed, where that Jupiter, because it's in Gemini, where it doesn't really like to be, it's not necessarily the place where it's going to feel its best. There might be a little bit of disparity there. Mercury in this retrograde is in its detriment. Mercury likes the details. Mercury likes to know all of the facts and the bits of information, whereas Sagittarius doesn't really care about the details. It cares about the bigger picture. So Mercury retrogrades are always periods of time where we have introspection, where we have sometimes you know, like things kind of seemingly going wrong, or, you know, pushing us back where we feel like we should be moving forward. But when we have Mercury in its detriment, it becomes maybe a slightly more, I don't want to say challenging, because I feel like every Mercury retrograde in a different sign has its own challenges. So I don't know if that's really like the right word to use, but it's definitely harder for Mercury to get clarity, whereas it would usually be able to get clarity a lot more easily, for example, if it was in, you know, say Virgo and it was having a Mercury retrograde, which is its home sign. So just something to be aware of. You know, there might not be mental clarity at this time. It might feel particularly difficult to grasp the details, but actually there is potential here to kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture. It's always, again, in the resistance to energy that makes the experience of the energy harder. So when we're surrendered, when we're going with it, when we're responding to what's coming, that's when we can really, really make the most of the potential of these periods of time. There is a mutual reception though with that Jupiter, as I mentioned last week, with that Jupiter being in its in Mercury's home sign and Mercury being in Jupiter's home sign. They can see each other, they can help, and they can understand each other. So that kind of helps things. There's this sense of them being able to support each other a little bit. So might not be as much difficulty as there would have been had that mutual reception not been happening. But again, not a time for moving forward. If you're feeling like you're walking through mud and you can't surrender to it, there's something in this period of time for you that's beneficial. And definitely check out the area of life that it's hitting for you, because that will give you a lot more understanding. Okay, moving on. So November, we have the Sun in Sagittarius trining Mars in Leo. So this is an energizing and vibrant aspect. Trines are the most positive aspects in astrology. And Mars and the Sun are the brightest planets in a lot of ways. They're the most vibrant and energizing planets that we have in the zodiac. So they give, like, when they're trining each other, when they're supporting each other, they give this bold, strong, courageous energy, which is a bit of a sharp contrast to the rest of the week in a way. Like a lot of the week, like the autumn, the moon, the Mercury retrograde, everything is going in. And then on Wednesday, we have this energy of like, boom, like, you know, here I am. So this is a great energy for being seen, for standing in your power, for getting shit done. It's very energizing. Usually this would be a great energy to initiate. and begin something. Mars just likes to start without thinking, and that can be really like courageously starting a business or whatever. However, because these retrogrades are happening, Mars is just about to station retrograde, so wherever it is now, it's going to revisit. So again, you know, not necessarily a great time for moving forward, but just understanding that there might be something you want to move forward with, and getting clarity on that is great. However, because of this, all of this inward movement, introspective energy, this energy probably better channeled in a slightly more present way. So less about like driving things forward and more about being bold, being courageous, maybe having a, you know, a difficult conversation, just being seen, taking a step towards being seen in a certain situation or area of life. Or, you know, I guess like channeling the enlivening energy into your day-to-day life, right? Like there's potential for this. Or, you know, like Mars also brings courage. So there is this sense of being able to maybe address something, you know, with the autumn energy of kind of going inwards, of going deep, of understanding, looking at old stories, old patterns, things you want to let go of. Maybe Mars can give you the courage, and the sun here could give you the courage to go places you've never really been before. And I would always really, really recommend to, you know, if you are doing any sort of shadow work or, you know, deep work, looking at like, you know, deep conditioning, anything like that, if you do have trauma, just practice responsibly and make sure that you are in a safe place, or you have people to hold space for you if you are going to go there and do that yourself. However, there is potential for this energy to be supportive for that work as long as you're practicing safely. So and then the Sunday, the 1st of December, is when we have the new moon in Sagittarius. So this is the beginning part of, this is like the new beginning energy of the cycle of the moon. So all week we've had energy descending, going inwards, because there's less energy around, because energy is moving forward. We have time to really get still and really quiet and really listen to what's actually happening inside. So it can be a really amazing time for getting clarity, internal clarity, really connecting with your intuition. It's a great time to set intentions, a new moon, because it's stepping into a new cycle and a new beginning, not only a new cycle of the month, which is where the moon will move through the full 28 days of its cycle, but also getting a bit of clarity on how you want to move through the next 6 months. The moon works in 30-day cycles, but it also works in like yearly cycles as well. We have a new moon in Sagittarius now. We'll have a full moon in Sagittarius. This is testing me at some point in 6 months. And then it will descend. So yes, it has a monthly cycle, but it also has a yearly cycle. And that's how I really like to work with intention setting with the moon, is like, okay, this is the area of life that this new moon is falling on, which again will be in the sign of Sagittarius. What intentions can I set for this new moon that will see me through the next year? So you have that full moon check-in point 6 months later where you can reflect, and then that's the, so this, the first 6 months is this period of action, and then the last 6 months is the period of descent. And that's really where things come to a culmination, and then you review before the new beginning in that area of life again. So great time to set intentions. Because of this retrograde, this moon cycle will be infused with this energy no matter what, because it's happening at that time in the same sign. So this could almost feel like a bit of a false start. There's like this fresh new energy of a new moon, and you want to kind of, you know, get started, set some intentions, get really clear. But then we've got all of this inward moving energy. We've got the Mercury retro, the Mars retro coming in like less than a week, trining this as well. So it's talking to it. And then we also have, you know, all of this autumn energy as well. So again, it's probably a really good time to set intentions more around what you want to revisit and get clarity on, what you want to address, what loose ends you want to tie up. Kind of focus more on inward intentions that aren't necessarily driving forward, but maybe are going back, because there's so much supportive energy to do that. So again, as I mentioned before, we've got a trine from Mars happening on Wednesday the 27th. It's just when it's exact, but it's still in a loose trine when this new moon happens. So we've got a bit of courage there for us to go there and kind of review the past if we feel like we need to, and if we feel like there's stuff we can set intentions around, and actually do some work, take some action around that. Just checking my notes to see if I have anything else I want to touch on. Yeah, and I guess it's It's kind of a good time to kind of, it's like that pre-2025 reflection. Like, this is a great new moon to be doing. I think this will be the last new moon of 2025, actually, potentially, unless we've got one like on the last day of, or the last few days of December. I've not actually checked the date of the next new moon yet. But this is a really, really brilliant time to kind of create space. We're moving towards that winter solstice, that seeding point, that real new beginning. So it's an absolutely brilliant time to focus on kind of just reviewing, of clearing out, of getting or clearing space, getting things out of the way, wrapping things up, to then begin that fresh new cycle with the winter solstice, with the new year coming, and then the energy will start moving forward. I think from like February 2025 onwards. So I think that's all I had to touch on this week. I did want to say, I think practice wise for this week, I'm not gonna, for those of you who are members, I'm not going to go into the recommended practices or journal prompts again this week, just because we're wrapping up the experiment, and I know a lot of you still haven't quite finished or got to that point yet. So we'll start with the usual schedule of journal prompts and things like that next week. This week, I'm just gonna say, like, I think practice wise, being more still and inward and reflective is going to be really helpful. So any practices in the dream or the shed section of the archives, just to support meditation, listening, connecting with your intuition, of like reflecting, letting go. There's some absolutely incredible sessions for addressing old stories, for going deeper with different specific fears, specific emotions, letting go of old narratives, anything like that. So the library is jam-packed full with that stuff. If anyone is working with something specific and you're on the membership and you want some guidance, please send me a message and I can help point you in the right direction depending on what that is. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on this week. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Lots of love, and we'll catch up on the next live stream next week. Bye.